I am Marwan Cameron, and this is The Conduit. All right, y'all, it is 5 p.m. on this beautiful Monday. It's October 18th in Kitsap County, 55 degrees. So glad that you could rejoin us for another show today. Earlier, as you know, we have our Monday show with the Bremerton Housing Authority, Executive Director Jill Stanton and Matt Garrett from Kitsap Community Resources. And today I have a very special guest for you. I have Bill Broughton, who is running for Bremerton mayor. So we're so honored that he would come on and spend a little time with us today and talk about his platform and why Kitsap County and Bremerton is important to him. So we won't waste any time. Let's go ahead and bring Bill on. How are you doing today, sir?
Hi, Marwan. I am fine. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm blessed and highly favored. I'm so thankful that you were willing to come on and have a conversation with us. We appreciate you for that.
Sure, my pleasure. My pleasure.
You know, and I got to tell you, waiting on the pamphlet to come out in the mailer and talk about the different candidates, I found out about you on YouTube. You were actually on a commercial. So it was definitely effective advertising. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, and Josh Farley just wrote a really nice article in the Kitsap Sun that came out, I think, yesterday, profiling both mayoral candidates. I thought he did a nice job on that. So,
yeah, you know, I saw it right before I was in between these podcasts, and I saw that he posted it, but I haven't had a chance to read it, so I'll definitely read it after. But let's get right into it. Will you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your background?
You bet. So I moved to Seattle back in the mid 70s when I got out of law school. I went to law school down at University of Miami, and I had a cousin teaching at PLU up here. So I came up to see her and was looking to relocate to a different area and fell in love with the Pacific Northwest and took a job in Seattle, but I didn't really like Seattle very much. So I started looking around to, neighboring localities. I went to Olympia and Port Angeles, Port Townsend, all over. And I picked Bremerton. I just loved Bremerton and got a job in the prosecuting attorney's office in Bremerton and worked there prosecuting cases for a while. And then I was fortunate enough to get the city attorney job when I was 30 years old. The city had just transitioned from contracting with a private law firm to having an in-house city attorney, and they hired me. So it was a great job. I loved public service. I loved being involved in public policy. We got a lot of great things accomplished when I was there. We had a lot of young, bright people there, and it was a lot of fun. So, it didn't pay all that great. So, I have a bunch of kids. So I went into private practice. I've been in private practice for over 40 years, representing governmental entities and, just citizens like you, and families and people that are being treated unfairly by the insurance companies, that sort of thing. So anyway, now it's my payback time. So I'm pretty unhappy with what's been not happening in Bremerton. We've got some pretty serious problems. Our streets and roads are in terrible shape. We've got a hidden tax on our water and sewer bills of 30%, which punishes our poorest citizens the most. And they don't tell you about it. Doesn't show up on the bill. I found it going through the city budget. One of my clients is a public utility district, and I've been integrally involved with them in bringing public municipal fiber to neighborhoods, and I want to do that in Bremerton. There's public fiber, Marwan, I don't know if you knew this, right downtown. It's been there for 20 years, and it's just been underutilized. It's a huge pipe. It's cheap. It's a great alternative to Comcast and CenturyLink and those guys. So
yeah, no idea, actually. It's been there for 20 years.
20 years. Yeah, we brought it 20 years ago to Bremerton, and it's just been very underutilized. So I want to deploy that out to the neighborhoods. There are some great programs out there the federal government has passed, where I can get internet to people for free. There's a federal subsidy for people that can't afford it. We've got kids trying to go to school on their cell phones, or we did last year, which is just inexcusable to me. So, and people need help. People need, people that don't have a lot of money need help with their internet bills. So I think I can bring internet to a lot of people that need it for free using this federal dollars that have already been appropriated. So, and underutilized. So, and then our downtown, we've got, a lot of empty buildings. That Bremer's department store building is just an eyesore. It's been there empty for 30 years. There are a lot of old empty buildings downtown, and we need housing. We have to have people living in our downtown to revitalize it. And they can walk to the shipyard, they can walk to the ferry. It's just it's a great place to house people, frankly, because it's multimodal. It would provide a lot of, I think, less expensive housing options for people that are having trouble finding a place that they can afford.
Hey, I'm going to ask that question while you're on it. There are a ton of underused or non-used buildings throughout Bremerton. I think of the Denny's on Wheaton Way, the old Sizzler right across the street. Just up and down. And so, if you are elected mayor, what's your proposal for all these buildings that are just sitting here and kind of rotting?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's, the advantage I've got in coming into this job is that, I've been representing public entities for my whole career. Right. So I have a lot of tools in my toolbox. And, what you do is you have these buildings. First of all, you reach out to the property owner and say, hey, you need to do something. You give them some period of time to either rehabilitate the structure or take it down. If they don't do it, then you go to court. You have a receiver appointed. I've been a receiver for Bremerton before, where we've taken old dilapidated housing and torn it down and built new homes. And the cost of doing that is assessed against the real estate, against the property. So it doesn't cost the taxpayers a dime, and it forces the property owner to clean it up. And that's a program that unfortunately has not gotten a lot of emphasis with our current administration, but it's something I know how to do, and I believe strongly in it. I mean, we've got to get these old dilapidated buildings out, because that's how you get new construction, is you clear the path.
So, Bill, I don't have any education or knowledge on how this process goes, but I talk to scores, maybe even close to hundreds of people that see these buildings, and they wonder how they've been able to sit in this state of decay year after year. Do you know why that's allowed, for the owners to just, let it depreciate, in such a way?
Well, I really don't know. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, the current mayor has accused me of being heavy-handed, I think was how he described my approach. But, you can describe it any way you want. I mean, the reality is, these old dilapidated buildings are getting in the way of progress, and they, part of the problem is Bremerton's got some of the strictest earthquake and fire codes in the state. So the Bremer building, for example, it's $1 million to retrofit it for earthquakes, even though it's survived several earthquakes. Fire marshal will require you to sprinkler the building. I mean, so the way the code's written in Bremerton, there's just no way you can make that building, rehabilitate that building effectively. So in that case, you've got to tear it down and build something else. And, the key is to bring private development interest in, do market studies, figure out what makes economic sense. And if the property owner is not willing to participate, you just take it from them, write them a check and say, thank you very much. Here's your money. You're standing in the way of progress, and we're not going to let you do that anymore.
I actually love that. I think that would be fantastic. I'm going to pull your website up so folks can take a look at that while we're talking here. And you can go to billforbremerton.com, and you can see that information here. There's a YouTube video with Bill, and then he has his top priorities, and there's 4. And so fix our streets, revitalize downtown, which we're kind of talking about here, eliminate the digital divide, lower water and sewer bills. So can we talk a little bit about fixing the streets? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I absolutely can. I mean, they haven't been a high enough priority in Bremerton, in my opinion. Budgets are about priorities, and, The streets are and sidewalks are in a horrible state of disrepair. And we've got disabled people who cannot navigate the sidewalks because of the condition of them and because they're not handicapped accessible. And so, what I'm telling people is I recognize that having safe, drivable streets and sidewalks is something government ought to be placing a higher priority on. So that's what I'm going to do. After fire and police, it's going to be my next highest priority. And so, every dollar I can find in Bremerton that we can save, I'm going to put it into our streets and sidewalks. And I think we can get a more effective job doing it with city crews than what we're doing now. So, that's something that I think is very important for government to do. I mean, Perry Avenue is a great example of, that's the gateway to Manette, and that's just that street's in horrible condition. It's been in horrible condition for the whole 20 years. So that's what I'll do. I'll inventory the streets. I'll do a needs assessment. I'll identify the worst ones that get the most use and start there, and just work my way down the list.
Gotcha. Absolutely. And there's a lot of streets that do need to that are in a state of disrepair, and there's a lot of work to be done for sure.
Yeah, there is.
We talked about the revitalization of downtown and some of the buildings. Can you speak to some of the other ideas that you wanted to do down there? I think you were talking about kind of mixed use. So aside from housing, what are some other things that you want to do with downtown?
Yeah. Mixed use is kind of a planner buzzword that doesn't, that I shy away from, because, I think if you want to encourage it, but you don't want to require it, because if you require it, like the city has done, you just get empty storefronts with housing up above, which doesn't do anybody any good. The folks I've talked to, for example, the grocery store people that I know that I've talked to have said, Bill, we could put a small grocery store downtown, but you have to have more people living there, right? So I think it's the chicken and the egg. I think we've got to get a nucleus of residential people downtown that will attract all of those services. And part of what I want to do is use that fiber optic I was telling you about. There's a great success story that I would use as a model in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where they had an old decaying downtown. They had the ability to access public fiber. They brought in the university. They brought in private startups and public-private partnerships. And, they're just going great guns now. They've got all this wonderful technology company startups going there. Got people living down there. They've got great restaurants. They've got great shops and bars. And, because you've got good high-paying wages and a really good industry that's in downtown Chattanooga because of the fiber. So I'm very excited about that, and that's one of the things I want to do when I become mayor.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, we've got questions firing in from the chat. So Christina asked, can you say more about the progress and how to be inclusive so members of the Bremerton community is behind revitalization of their neighborhoods?
How to be inclusive. Well, we're talking neighborhoods, I guess, is a little bit different question. Kerry Bozeman, who is a supporter of mine, and Patty Lent, they're both supporters of mine, former mayors. Kerry Bozeman talked to me about actually creating a Department of Neighborhoods, which I think is a great idea. And the concept behind that is you have a liaison at the city who is responsible for coordinating with all of the defined neighborhoods in Bremerton, whether it's Charleston or Manette. And, you get some dialogue going, you get some participation going, you get some cooperation going, and you find out, what do they want from the city? What do they want to see in terms of revitalization? I think they're going to say streets and sidewalks is one thing they're going to say, but, we need to listen to what our neighborhood people want. We've got some good parks, which I think is important, and I think they're doing a pretty good job of taking care of them. I think we could use more. But yeah, I think a Department of Neighborhoods is a Kerry Bozeman idea. I'm going to borrow from him because I think it makes a lot of sense.
Gotcha. Okay. We've got a comment here. Chattanooga is a great example. Fiber is not the only factor in their success. That's from Mark Boatwright Frost. Mark also asked, With the growing challenge for municipal funds, what are you looking at other than expanding development?
Well, Mark, you've got a couple of really good questions there. Bremerton's kind of at a crossroads right now, and you talk about the growing challenge for municipal funds. I'm assuming you're talking about grant funding, and you're right that grant funding is difficult to get. Although if the infrastructure bill passes in Congress, there's going to be a lot of money out there. I mean, frankly, the broadband department in Olympia, the Office of Broadband, and that works for the governor, they've got money right now, the CURT grants, and they just aren't getting applications. So I think that's just a matter of not being ready to participate in the funding for projects that are available. But municipal money is cheap too. Bremerton's got the ability to issue bonds, and right now, you're not going to see much lower interest rates for, just like your mortgages. Municipal bond rates are very low. So Bremerton can borrow money now or refinance existing bonds and get a lot of bang for its buck and not have a lot of interest to pay on the repayment of the bond debt.
Yeah, absolutely. He has a follow-up there, and he asked, are you talking with KPUD?
Yeah, I'm their lawyer, actually. So I've been involved with KPUD since we deployed fiber. So yeah, I've worked with them for many, many years. And they did an estimate here a few years ago where they figured out that they could deploy high-speed public fiber to all of the school children in Bremerton School District for $2 million. So I mean, that's probably dated now. It's probably more expensive, but it's not a huge lift, especially if you can get state and federal funding for it. So, the nice thing about Bremerton in terms of deploying fiber optic is, those telephone and power poles we see that are aerial, that are maybe they're unsightly, but the reality is they allow for deployment of fiber optic relatively inexpensively, because you can put those. PUD's got an agreement with Puget Sound Energy to put their fiber optics on those poles, and so you can get a long way for not a lot of money to get to neighborhoods and to houses. So yeah, no, yeah, the PUD is a good friend of mine and a good client of mine, and we've worked really well together over the years.
So, perhaps Wi-Fi based backbone across the city, would you think KPUD might be willing to partner in that?
I think so. I mean, it's all about the dollars, right? What the PUD has not been able to do, because they haven't had the statutory authority until recently, is to be an internet service provider. So I want Bremerton to be an internet service provider. And the reason why is because it opens up a whole nother door of monetary assistance. You can get E-rates from the schools. Internet service providers are they have a lot more money available for them. And KPUD historically has only been a wholesaler because of the way the law was structured. Bremerton has been able to be a retailer for a long time and has never taken advantage of it until now.
Well, Mark is definitely in agreement with you. Let's change topics a little bit. I have another question here. What is your plan for addressing homelessness in Bremerton? We know that this issue is getting worse and worse.
Yeah. Well, it sure is. And, I talk about housing first. I mean, I think, first of all, let's be honest about it. Bremerton doesn't have the financial resources to really be able to fix this problem. I mean, Seattle spent, I think, $180 million last year on homelessness and really didn't make a dent in the problem. I mean, the mayor talks about they're building a 38-bed facility, which is great, but 38 beds isn't going to do a whole lot of good. It's kind of a drop in the ocean, But, we've got to find places to house these people, and we've got to combine housing with drug counseling, because a lot of these people have drug addiction issues. A lot of these people have mental health issues. I think these people need help with job placement and, helping them to find places to work. And all those things take time and they take money. But, what's happening now is a lot of nothing, right? So I can commit that I will start working right away to try and find, low-cost housing. I mean, maybe we're talking about, tents on platforms with a community kitchen and community bath and shower. But one thing I will do that's not being done now is, for the homeless people who are breaking into cars, who are shoplifting, right now they're not being prosecuted at all by our city. And I think that sends the wrong message. I mean, a lot of these homeless people are coming from somewhere else, like Seattle, and the more you allow lawlessness to occur, the more you're going to attract, people that want to be able to commit crimes and not be accountable for it. I mean, that's part of what Seattle's problem has been for a long time. So, I'm a former prosecutor, former city attorney, and people tell me, well, the homeless don't commit crimes. Well, some of them do. And the ones that don't commit crimes, my hand's out to them. But the ones that do, they can't do that. That's just not going to be welcome in Bremerton.
Right, absolutely. And I've heard that Kitsap County, particularly Bremerton, is considered kind of like this dumping area for homeless, and folks come over from Seattle, other states coming here,
Right.
and just having the homeless population relocate here. And I don't know what's behind that. If it's our social services are, they think they're gonna have more access, and so they're saying go there, or what's behind that. It's just interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, it's got to be data driven, right? So when I talk to fire and police, nobody's really talking to them about this, which surprises me. You'd think the mayor would be talking to them about this because they are the first responders. I mean, they know a lot of these folks. They deal with them on a regular basis. We've got to get data on, who they are and how old are they and where did they come from and where are their families and what are their issues and what kind of help do they need and where did they come from, right? So we don't have that kind of data, and until we do, we're really shooting in the dark.
Mark is saying, what about community support and education in conjunction with law enforcement?
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah, I mean, we've got Kitsap Mental Health. I was on the board of Kitsap Mental Health for a number of years. They've got mental health professionals, and I guess don't misunderstand what I'm saying about law enforcement. I mean, when you've got someone who's got a significant mental issue that needs to be dealt with, it's not fair to send the police there. It's not fair for the person that's got the mental health issue. It's not fair for the police. They don't know how to deal with that. So that's where you bring mental health professionals in. That's what their job is. I think we need more funding for mental health. That's always been an issue. When I was on the board of Kitsap Mental Health, there was always an issue trying to get funding, but yeah, no, it's not. We expect, just like we expect our teachers to do too many things, I think we expect our fire and police to do too many things. I think we've got to give them some help.
100% fact there for sure. Mark is saying, what about the way Olympia is building tiny homes with associated services? Do you think that might be a good model here in Kitsap?
Yeah, no, good for you, Mark. No, I totally support that. And I mean, my platform 10 idea is kind of the same idea. Although, like I said, I think you've got to have a community kitchen. You've got to have some treatment areas. You've got to have some community bathrooms. I think you get more bang for the buck, although I like the tiny home idea. Bremerton doesn't allow RV parks in the city. They don't allow them under their zoning. And that leads me to an affordable housing situation that we can also talk about, because my opponent's been talking about how he's done so much to create affordable housing. There hasn't been one unit of affordable housing created in Bremerton in the last 4 years. But we can zone and allow RV parks. I mean, those are, and encourage mobile home parks. I mean, those are less expensive housing alternatives for people. But yeah, no, Mark, I like the tiny home idea. The codes have to be revised some to allow for that. But I think there's, Bremerton really needs to take a hard look at its codes. I don't know why Bremerton has the strictest codes in the state of Washington when it comes to fire safety and earthquakes. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I think we need common sense in these codes, because I think they hurt us sometimes unwittingly.
And you're saying in the entire state they have the strictest codes?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like I was saying, the Bremer building, it's $1 million to earthquake proof that building. So how's anybody ever going to be able to do that with that old building? Doesn't make any sense. You just got to tear it down.
Now, I don't want to put words in your mouth in answering this question, but what are your thoughts on community resilience? My thought is, we can't rely on the federal government to, continuously bail us out. Money is finite, and so we have to find some other ways to fix the situations ourselves. So, what are your thoughts on community resilience?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by that. I mean, I find the Bremerton people to be very resilient. I mean, it's a wonderful place to live. People have been so warm and welcoming to me. I mean, I love the people that live here, and I want to help them. But when you talk about community resilience, I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're asking.
If the person that typed that question, if you want to elaborate that on the chat, I will go ahead and follow that up with Bill. Another question here: how do you plan to address rising rent costs and the lack of low income housing? I know you kind of touched on the lack of low income housing, but our rent costs are pretty high.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, there's a good friend of mine who served on the board with me at Kitsap Building Association. His name's Kurt Weiss, and I'd love to get him back here. I think he's in California now, but they have the Housing Authority in Bremerton does a terrific job, and they've got Section 8 certifications, and we've got units that qualify for that rental assistance. But again, they can't do it all alone. I mean, what Bremerton's got to do is they've got to change their zoning laws. I mean, I led the fight for accessory dwelling unit modernization, and it took us 3 years to get that passed, but we were able to get it passed. I mean, that's going to create some more lower cost rental units. We've got to change the zoning to allow for less single family zoning and more duplex, triplex, fourplex structures. So somebody might be able to afford something if they can rent a duplex, rent the space next to them. And frankly, it just costs less to build a duplex than it does a single family home. It costs less to build a fourplex than a duplex. So, we've got to look at those avenues. And frankly, the biggest thing is we've got to encourage developers to come in here who are willing to take incentives to build low income housing with a dedicated low income number of units as part of their development project that's there for 50 years of guarantee of low income rental.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a broad question here. So you can answer this any way that you want. From the chat, how do your plans differ from the current mayor? So maybe touch on some other things that maybe you disagree on his stance, or things that the direction he's gone in outside of housing or homelessness or the such.
Well, part of why I decided to run is that, I don't think our mayor, if he's got plans, he hasn't done much to accomplish them. I mean, there are annexations that I want to do for the out to East Bremerton Way to Lowe's and Walmart to bring those businesses into the city and create more revenue. I've got all kinds of ideas about things that can be done. I've got a climate change program. I want to retrofit Cassat Dam with hydropower. I want to electrify the city fleet. We dumped 100,000 gallons of raw sewage into Puget Sound last year. I'm going to stop that. People that's human error, and people that do that are going to be accountable for it. So I've got a pretty bold climate change program. Frankly, we've got to be recruiting people around this country. I've got a program I call the brightest and the best. So when we need to hire someone, we need to go out and recruit. And we have this mayor has always hired from within. And I always joke about it because I'm an old white guy, but we hire old white guys. And, we need young people in the city, and we need diversity, and we need inclusion. And, we've got to take some effort to do that. And it's doable. And I think, the pool gets stagnant when you don't bring any new talent in. And, like I said, one of the things I really enjoyed about when I worked for the city was that we had a lot of young, bright people working there. Kathy McCluskey was a great city clerk, and we had Don Pratt was a great planning director, and we had Dave Eastan was an energetic HR guy. And, so I think we need energy and vitality in our workforce and management in the city.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that answer there. We've got another question from the chat. You've got a lot of folks asking questions, so that is fantastic.
Good, good.
Do you have a plan to work with the county, state, and local nonprofit organizations to help the historically disadvantaged communities in Bremerton? And I guess if so, what can you give some examples of your plan there?
I don't have a plan yet. I mean, I would like to put together a plan. Um, it's I just it's not something I'm really have any training or experience in doing, but it's something I would like to do. Um, I think it's important for our local governments to work together, and I think it's important for us to work with our nonprofits and our legislature. Um, so that's something I will reach out and try and do. I know, the county, we were going back to the homeless question. I mean, the county brought all their homeless population that they were housing at the fairgrounds and put them on Kitsap Way in Bremerton. I mean, for me, that's not without any services, right? Or financial support. So that's not working together. That's just moving your problem from one jurisdiction to another, which I will not do.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I'm sorry I don't really have a plan yet, but I would love to. I would love to have one, and I'd love to learn more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. As a follow-up to that, what do you believe are the challenges that the Black community face here in Bremerton? And what have you done specifically to address those concerns? And what is your agenda if reelected? Now, it's stated that way because we asked the exact same question of
Sure.
current mayor, so we wanted to be fair in that.
Well, Larry Robertson was a very dear friend of mine, and I knew him for a long time, and I did some pro bono work with him when he built the Marvin. Well, he was instrumental in bringing the Marvin Williams Center to Bremerton. Um, the biggest issue, frankly, is just inclusion, and awareness, and we just don't have as much of that as we need to have. For example, how many people of color work in the city of Bremerton, and not very many. And so, we've got to partner to make that happen, right? We've got to work with all communities of color, to make sure that they're getting the mentoring they need and the support they need to, apply for and get these good paying government jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you talk about, fiber optic and internet, do you have a plan or some ideas on how you would go about getting more Black folks in city government and being more inclusive in that way?
Well, we've got to attract them. We've got to put some effort into it, right? I mean, we've got to, it's a partnership, right? We've got to reach out to them and find out how we can help them, and find out how they can help us, and it's a two-way street. And I just don't think there's much effort being put into recruitment and that sort of thing right now. So and I miss Deacon Robertson. I wish he was here because I know he and I could get a lot of things done together.
Yeah, that left a huge vacuum
Yes,
for
it
sure.
did.
It was a tremendous amount of momentum that was being carried by Bishop Robinson. So that loss came at a particularly hard time, especially on the precipice of the pandemic kicking in right
Right.
after it, right? And it's like, okay, so how do we go forward and continue to grow and uh, build community and relationship with each other? Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Let's
Yeah, I
see.
mean that's a great facility. I mean, I was there for the opening of it, and the classrooms they have there, and again, the Bremerton could be providing training and education, and mentoring, and helping to educate everybody about what kinds of opportunities are available in the fire service and the police service, and and the government, and that's something we could be doing.
There was another question from a citizen that we asked the current mayor, and it was, why doesn't Bremerton get a later ferry run? 9 p.m. is the last boat out of Bremerton. He happens to work, I think, at 11 or 12 p.m., and so it's really difficult for him to get back and forth and work, because jobs here on the peninsula can be a challenge also.
Right. Well, that's a pet peeve of mine. Bremerton's has been a stepchild in the ferry system for as long as I've lived here, frankly, and I just think that needs to stop. But what we have to do again is we have to work with our legislators. First of all, we've got to get a better sustainable funding source for our ferry system than the way it's been funded historically. So I think, a rising tide floats all boats. So I think if we got more funding, more sustainable funding for the ferry system that it deserves, then we would no longer have to skimp and save. And, the skimping and saving always happens on the Bremerton run, right? Yes. And so, part of the problem is our legislative districts have gotten divided up. So we really don't have I shouldn't say that because Christine Rolfes is a friend of mine, but we don't have, it'd be nice if we had a legislator who was dedicated to serving the citizens of Bremerton, as opposed to the splintering of the legislative districts we have in the city now. But again, I think, getting our legislators together and, number one, getting a solid funding base for ferries, and then number two, requiring our ferry ridership to be treated the same or roughly the same. I hear people say, well, Bainbridge gets better boats and more boats because it's got more ridership, but that shouldn't be the only criteria is ridership. It should be need based as well, right? So, Bremerton, what are you going to do? You're going to drive around? I mean, it's a difficult thing, and so our ferries, getting these passenger ferries was a great thing for our community, I think. But they only run during the commuter rush hour times, so I think our state ferry system has to do better, and Bremerton's we got to make sure with the legislators that Bremerton is not on the bottom of the ferry wish list every time.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. To circle back on the community resilience, Mark says community resilience is engaging the community to create networked neighborhoods, communities, etc.
Well, I'm not going to give a very good answer to that question because I'm just not sure how to go about it, quite frankly. Like I said, I think I do like the idea that Mayor Bozeman had about creating a Department of Neighborhoods. I do think, we spend a lot of time on downtown, and I think that's important to do that because that's kind of the heart of the city, but I don't think we should do it to the neglect of our other neighborhoods in the city. So, I think, understanding what these communities need and having the city help provide that to them. I mean, aside from fire, police, and parks, but specifics, I'm happy to learn more about it, but I don't really have a concrete plan at this point, I'm sorry to say, but I'll get one.
All right, so let's circle back to your website. We kind of got through the first two, fixing our streets and revitalizing downtown. Let's touch a little bit more on eliminating the digital divide. So you talked about the 20-year-old fiber optic cable that exists here in the county, which again is alarming and surprising. Can you speak a little bit more about that? I've actually done a few podcasts recently about digital literacy and how important that is. So you definitely hit a string for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's great that the PUD's got a fiber backbone in Bremerton. I mean, and there's a fiber optic node down on Park and 8th, I think it is, which is a tremendous facility for Bremerton to utilize. We're talking internet now is it's like water and sewer. It's a utility and electricity. It's a utility that everybody has to have to be able to learn, to be able to look for work, to be able to really function anymore. And so, giving Comcast a monopoly to provide internet service and charge whatever they want, that's not working, right? So that's why I was so proud of the PUD for what they've been able to accomplish around the county. And they mainly focused on rural areas to provide, this high speed, we're talking a gigabit of pipe, and we're talking relatively low cost. I think, I have PUD fiber here in Bremerton because I brought it into my development. And I pay, I think, 75, 80 bucks a month for a gigabit of internet, which is about half what you'd pay, I think, with Comcast. So we've got to deploy it. We've got to deploy it to the neighborhoods, and there's money to do that, federal and state money to do that. And for those people, I think it's a $50,000 a year threshold. If it's less than that, there's federal money to provide internet to families for free. There's a $50 a month federal subsidy available, but you just got to, and it's not being utilized, right? Mm-hmm. The money's just sitting there in Washington, D.C. right now because people aren't, Comcast doesn't have any motivation to have people take advantage of that. And frankly, that's what public fiber should be doing is we need to provide that basic service to people for free if they need it for free.
And to that end, my opinion on that is, the internet that is offered for free, like there's a $9.99 internet. It's tremendously slow. And we're in an age now where everything needs to be connected through your Wi-Fi. I mean, your light bulbs and everything you can think of, and everyone has a number of gadgets, their TVs, and it's such a drain.
Right.
And so, that's not necessarily a consideration. So when kids went into lockdown and had to do school at home on the Chromebooks, which are, leave something to be desired, and
Right.
then you parents that are trying to figure out the Chromebooks, and they may be working and trying to figure out Zoom if they had that privilege, and they're just going back and forth, and that additional drain on a family with multiple children on there. We have to solve these issues. So I definitely absolutely agree with that.
Right. I mean, I've seen kids trying to learn on one of these on a cell phone, and the problem with the Comcast technology is that, 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock when everybody gets on, it gets really slow. And if you're trying to do multiple devices in one household, it gets really slow or somebody gets kicked off, So frankly, there needs to be a public effort to bring this fundamental service to our citizens. And that's what I'm pledging to do, is to end the digital divide. That's how I look at it.
Bill, I mean, you are preaching to the choir. I taught at OC for a number of years, and one of the big challenges there, like you said, you would have college students working on their cell phones, and they're trying to type 5-page papers on a cell phone. It's like, what is going on?
Right.
And it would just drive you crazy, and you'd watch them struggle. I did a little exercise on keyboarding and words per minute and how much time people spend trying to produce, the same work as someone that has these skills. You take the devices away from them and say, hey, here, do it with a rock and not a computer. I mean, that's what it's akin to. So,
right.
Man, yeah, you got me there. And so the last one here is the lower water and sewer bills. So can you elaborate on that? I was pretty interested to see that. And, it sounds like there's some, is it price gouging or just really hitting the Bremerton citizens over the head with these really high prices?
Well, my biggest complaint about it is they don't tell anybody about it, right? So first thing I'm going to do when I'm mayor is I'm going to put on the sewer and water bills the 30% tax. I'm going to show people how much they're being taxed on these utilities, because it's not fair to tax. Again, we're talking our poor citizens now are having to pay for other governmental services that they shouldn't have to pay for. So, I mean, I think Bremerton's done it to balance the budget. I mean, look, we built a sewer treatment plant when I was city attorney back in the 80s, and we got federal grant funding, we got contribution from the Navy. One of the things I'm in awe of are the Bremerton's founders back in the early 1900s who went out and bought a 6,000 acre watershed, which is where Bremerton gets its surface water supply. So it's very inexpensive quality water. I mean, our utility bills, well, they should be drastically less than they are. And I think that's why the city raids them. They're like, okay, well, here's a place we can find some money. So, that's just wrong. And, by putting it on the bills, and I think it's going to force the city council, because they're going to hear from their constituents, it's going to force them to find other ways to fund government rather rather than rating your utilities for it. I mean, the utilities need the money. I mean, if you talk to the superintendent of the water department, he's going to tell you that, there are other things they should be using that money for within the water infrastructure. And like I've talked about, we have sewage spills going into Puget Sound that shouldn't happen because we've got infrastructure issues. So that's where I'm coming from on that. I mean, my biggest complaint, like I said, is they just do it without telling you about it, and that's just wrong to me. Government needs to be transparent.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we have Pastor Ellington from New Horizon Baptist Church. He's having some internet problems, so I'm going to try to connect him here on a phone call. Pastor Ellington, can you hear us? See if I can get him in here real quick, Bill. All right. So again, we are with Bill Broughton, who is running for Bremerton mayor. You can check out his webpage at billforbremerton.com. A lot of good information there. Definitely share this information out. The election is November 2nd, so do get out and vote. You need to make sure that you are educated, you know what the issues are, and make sure that your interests are represented. So we definitely appreciate Bill for coming on here today and having this conversation with us and answering these questions. I'd like to say, just from my personal thoughts, that it's really nice to kind of have a diversity of thought, right? There are so many different issues that need to be worked on, and it's good to see different perspectives and different ways that people want to go about, solving the issues that exist in our community. So, again, thank you for that, Bill, for coming on.
You bet.
And we're trying to get Pastor on here. He is. I think he's in a bad space as far as internet, cell phone.
Bad internet, right? Yeah.
Let's see how that's going. Pastor, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
All right. Can you hear him there, Bill?
I can.
All right. So go ahead and ask your question there, Pastor.
Okay, I'm not able to hear Mr. Broughton, and I apologize if I repeat any questions that already's been asked, because I'm just kind of getting connected here. But Mr. Broughton, I'd like to know. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good.
Oh, I'd like to know what was the deciding factors that made you want to run this particular term, and what, if any at all, concerns do you have with the way that Mayor Wheeler has governed the city thus far?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not doing it for the money. I mean, it's a pretty significant pay cut for me, but Bremerton gave me an opportunity when I was 30 years old to be the city attorney of the 10th largest city in the state at the time. And I really enjoyed the work. We did a lot of good things when I was here, and I enjoyed it. I mean, we started a domestic violence program. I figured out a way to get more drunk drivers off the street. Annexed the shipyard, got the golf course back under city control. And that made a big impact on the citizens, and I really liked doing it. It made me feel good. And so now it's my opportunity to come back. And frankly, if I thought Mayor Wheeler was doing a good job, I wouldn't have run. We're at a crossroads right now. And, I know how to do this job. And I say we're at a crossroads. We got 20,000 people moving to Kitsap County in the next 20 years. We got housing costs are out of sight. We don't have any common sense regulation of zoning and business controls. They just don't make any sense. We ran Viking Fence out of here, tried to run them out. There's a friend of mine who was bringing a new business to town. I just got fed up. I did my own subdivision here, and I can give you 100 reasons why the houses cost more than they should because of rules that don't make any sense, So, and like I said, the downtown, I'm just tired of not seeing anything happen there. And again, it's an opportunity. I mean, we got Quincy Square, which is great. mean, Mike Brown, Wes Larson, they're good friends of mine. I think they've done a lot for Bremerton, but they can't do it by themselves, right? So we're at a crossroads. We got more people coming. We've got cheap money. We've got access to grant funds. I mean, there are a lot of things that could happen for us to become a really fantastic city. And so, I know how to get us there, I think. So that's why I'm running.
All right. So he answered that question. Pastor, do you have another question for him?
I'm sorry. So I'm kind of I got a patchwork of things.
Okay, I can see you in the chat saying that you can hear now. So were you able to hear Bill's answer there?
No, I wasn't able to hear his answer. I apologize about that.
That's fine. So I'll ask you to listen to it offline. What's your second question?
Yeah, I'll listen to him later. I don't know if he got specific with the issues that he has with the way Mayor Willer was governing the city. I heard him. I heard part of his answer. He said that if he didn't have a problem with the way the mayor was running, he would not have ran himself. And so, can he be specific in the areas that he thinks the most crucial areas he thinks the city needs improvement in? And then I'd like to, once he answers that, I'd like to get into a little bit more specific questions in regards to his viewpoint as to the Black community.
Sure. Okay, Bill, did you get that?
I did. Well, I'll give you, the number one priority that the mayor ran on 4 years ago was affordable housing. And, like I said earlier, there hasn't been one unit of affordable housing created in the last four years, right? And I don't, Greg's a nice guy. I mean, he spent his career in the shipyard. This is complicated stuff. This is hard stuff. And I don't think, the shipyard is really the training you need to be able to know how to get things done. So, frankly, the zoning is a big piece of this. Like I said earlier, single family zoning creates expensive housing, and regulations that don't make any sense create expensive housing. In the state of Washington, almost 40 cents of every dollar of a home is because of government regulations. And I'm not talking about environmental regulations now. I'm just talking about regulations that are dumb. I had to build sidewalks to nowhere and sewer lines to nowhere and dedicate right away the city would never need. All those things cost money, and there are 100 examples of that. So yeah, I mean, when you say you want affordable housing, and housing, I think the cost of housing was gone up 50% in the last 4 years, 60%. I mean, that's an abject failure there of leadership. So yeah, I mean, there are things you can do. It's tough. But there are things you can do, and I know how to do them. So, we've got right now in Bremerton, we've got mandatory sprinkler requirements for new single-family homes. People should have a choice on whether they want to have a sprinkler system in their home or not. And, they cost $5,000. They add $5,000 the cost of a home. So, there are lots of examples of that. I know how to get the price of housing down, and starting with more common sense zoning and more common sense regulation is one of the things I'll be able to do relatively quickly.
Gotcha. Absolutely. So, Pastor, if you heard that answer, go ahead with your third question there.
Yeah. So, wow. Okay. So this just opens up a whole nother ball of wax. Here's the thing, and Mr. Broughton, do you believe that it's actually possible to reverse the rental crisis we're in? Once landlords have had a taste of that type of money, right? Are they willing to lower their prices? Will they be willing to lower their prices? Are you able to, ensure the constituents that, hey, if we vote for you, we can go back to 2016, pre-2017 prices where, housing was a lot affordable. And I do agree with you. I took a few years away from Bremerton. I went to Nevada and to help my mom out for a few years. And I came back and I was blown away by the prices. So how are you going to bring prices back down and make them affordable where they were, in 2016, 2017, and
Right.
before?
Okay, so first, that's a very good question. The first thing you've got to do is you've got to create incentives for developers to build low-income housing, where the unit is guaranteed to be low-income housing for a long period of time, decades. Okay, and you do that through a combination of development incentives and tax relief. Okay, and they do this all over the country. They're just not doing it in Bremerton. So, for example, a developer gets a tax break for his 100-unit apartment complex, but he's got to have 15 or 20 units of that have got to be set at a low rate, and that rate is controlled, and that space is available only for those people who qualify for it for a period of decades. Okay, that's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do, and I'm talking about zoning, I'm talking about allowing more than just single-family residential homes, which are the most expensive to build. So when you build a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex, you can maybe live in one side and rent out another unit, but there's no going back. I guess we're not, I hear what you're saying. We're not going to see rents roll back again. That's because we got a huge supply problem. We got not much supply and huge demand. I mean, I tried to rent a place for my son last year in Bremerton, and not only was it expensive, but some of the places I went to were just filthy.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to the landlord saying, can't you even clean this place before you want to rent it out for $1,400 a month? It's just disgusting. So anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a complex problem. I mean, we've got lumber prices going up, supply chain issues, construction costs are going up, and those are going to have to flatten themselves out. But yeah, people need a place to live.
There's a lag. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. He was just finishing up his question there, Pastor. Did that answer your questions there?
Yeah, that answered my question. And so let's move on to community a little bit, Broughton. So Bremerton, I've loved this city for a long time. I've been a resident here over 20 years. When my wife and I had our first child, we came to visit and never left. We loved it that much. We decided to raise our family here. Times are changing. Things, the city's growing. There's good and bad in that. But just in light of what we've seen across our nation, and I thank God we haven't had to deal with any issues as what we saw in some other places throughout the country. But what is your approach with dealing with and connecting with and understanding and having open relationships with the minority community? And what are your relationships right now like with the minority community? And specifically, because I'm a Black man, I'll ask about the Black community.
Thank you, Pastor.
Sure. Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm sorry to have lost my friend Larry Robertson, because, I think I would have him speak up on my behalf. But, I grew up in Virginia. So my community was half white, half Black growing up. I was a public defender down in Florida where I went to law school. And, I represented a lot of people of color in that job. I'll reach out to this community. I guess that's the best way to answer it. I'll extend a hand, because I think it's hard to be a person of color in Bremerton, frankly, or not as much in Bremerton, but in Kitsap County, generally speaking. I mean, it's a very white community. So
to that, there's a couple other questions in the chat here. So one is, do you use race equity lens in your decision making? If so, please give specific examples and describe your process.
Race equity lens. Well, I'm not sure what that means, but I know Bremerton's got to do a better job. As I said earlier, Bremerton's got to do a better job of reaching out to communities of color to make sure that they're involved in employment opportunities that Bremerton can provide. I am a reformer. When I was city attorney back in the 80s, we did quite a bit of police reform in the 80s, and I think made it a better police department. But yeah, that's I think, we've got to have a policy of inclusion, right? And I think that's the key.
So a follow-up question to that is, when racist images and rhetoric show up in our communities, what will your role be in addressing it if elected?
Well, I certainly won't stand for it. And, there are state and federal laws now, hate crime statutes that, we can use. I mean, like I said earlier, I'm a law and order guy. I'm a former prosecutor. I think people that do that sort of thing ought to be prosecuted for it. There needs to be more, I guess, tolerance of our fellow citizens and intolerance of people of hatred and racism.
Yeah, I'll get back to you, Pastor. Let me just get some of these in the chat here, and then we'll come back to you, okay?
Yeah.
All right. So, do you support the creation of an empowered community review board for Bremerton?
Again, I'm sorry, I'm just not sure what that means. I'll tell you one thing. I'm not a big fan of boards. I'm kind of a man of action, right? So when I say that I'm going to hire more people of color in Bremerton, I don't need a board to do that. I mean, I'm going to just do it, right? So, but I'm not sure what that is.
All right, I appreciate that. Pastor, go ahead with your question.
So I want to kind of go back to the community action board part. So as far as the definition, so I was kind of talking a little bit earlier about some of the racial issues we've seen across the country, in the last year or so. A lot of major cities and some small cities have developed citizen review boards that review, certain questionable actions that police officers take, and are you for that type of change where you would empower the citizens not just to review the actions, but to have actually have a voice in actions that need to be taken if things are found to be not as they should be?
Well, let me think about that for a second. I mean, here's what I can tell you. I can tell you that if I'm the mayor, you're not going to need a community review board, because I'm going to be the review board, and I'm not going to stand for, racism or bigotry or hatred or that sort of conduct by anybody who works for me, right? And, I used to tell my police officers all the time when I was a city attorney, I said, you know what? And I'd go to the lineups and I'd talk to them. I'd say, I got your back 100%, as long as you're doing what you're supposed to do. When you're not doing what you're supposed to do, you're in trouble with me, right? And you're in trouble with the chief of police, because that's something I will not tolerate. And so that's a commitment I can give to all of you that are listening here today, that I will not stand for bigotry, racism, hatred, any of those sorts of behaviors in my city.
Did you catch that, Pastor?
I did.
Good.
I did.
Okay.
All right. So I'm gonna let some more intelligent minds ask some questions, and I'm gonna end with this last one that I asked Mayor Willer. The last question I asked Mayor Willer was about the the huge traffic jams that we experience every day of the week, Monday through Friday, when the shipyard lets out, trying to get around that Gorse Bend. You know, we spent a lot of money, you know, developing that, you know, that merge right there that was supposed to ease traffic. And in my opinion, it's only gotten worse. And I do believe maybe some of that is due to increase in population. You know, I've thought about a bridge to Port Orchard. What would you do specifically if you were elected to address that problem? And just traffic around town, period, because it's getting really bad.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna give Greg Wheeler some credit for that. I mean, you know, he got $750,000 from the federal government to study traffic and parking, and that included Gorst. And I was with you. I was like, why don't you just build a bridge, right? Doesn't that make more sense? But apparently not, for environmental reasons or concerns of our tribal nations or whatever. But, you know, there is a plan now and there is funding now, is what I'm told, that we're finally going to fix this Gorst problem. And it's some series of elevated highways they're going to build. I don't know. I haven't seen the plan, but I understand that they're going to fix it, and I think they actually are. So good for them.
Oh, that's awesome. That's good to hear, because I didn't know anything about that at all. Maybe. Oh, go ahead, Pastor.
But yeah, so if elected, you would continue with the path that Wheeler has set out already.
Absolutely. I mean, look, this is. You need state and federal money to do this. This is a state highway, but yeah, no, I give Greg credit where credit is due. He's done a good job on that issue. So yeah, and I would certainly continue to be a cheerleader for the state, you know, and continuing on that process. I mean, I think they found the money. The money's there. They've got it. They're doing design, so it's going to happen, which is great.
All right, that is awesome. So, you know, we definitely appreciate you for coming on. We've got maybe one or two more questions. So get them in quick, folks, because, you know, Bill has given us a lot of his time. So we definitely appreciate that. One question is, do you agree that accurate U.S. history, including the structural racism, colonialism, etc., should be taught in schools?
Well, that's not really a question for the mayor. That's a question for the school board, you know, so that's not something I really have any control over. You know, I will say this. I do think that, you know, to some extent, you know, these are generational issues, and I do think that we're making steady progress, maybe not as quickly as we would like, but I think we're getting there.
Gotcha, for sure. Now, Mark talks about Cascadia Rising a lot, and he says common sense would suggest that we put a road higher up from Gorse due to the projected liquefaction in the Gorse area. What's your thoughts on that?
You know, Mark's a smart guy. You know, Mark's raised a lot of good points today, and you know, again, I'm not an engineer, Mark. I understand what you're saying. I mean, it's all fill, right? So if it's all fill and there's an earthquake, it's going to liquefy. I'm assuming they're going to engineer for that. I imagine they're going to have to sink the pilings down into the subsurface soils there below the fill. But that's an engineering question. I don't know.
Gotcha. Yeah, Mark definitely did ask a lot of good questions. So, you know, again, it is Bill Broughton. You can, again, check out the website, billforbremerton.com. There is only 2 weeks left, guys. So, guys and gals, I should say. So please do your research. I hope this was informative for you to have access to Bill in this way. Bill, we definitely thank you for coming on and, you know, giving us your time and your thoughts and your ideas. We can definitely see your passion for Bremerton. It shows through. It was good to listen to you talk about your ideas. Oh, we got one more coming in here. All right, last question, guys. Okay, these last two questions. Is that okay, Bill? We got two.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
All right. What are your plans Pastor asks, what are your plans to modernize the inner city? And then I've got one more from Mark.
Well, I love Mark's last question. Will Bill reopen the mayor's office? Absolutely, I will. I couldn't believe it when Mayor Wheeler took office. I went up there and found that he'd put a lock on the mayor's office door. And, we've had, I don't know how many years of mayors in the city of Bremerton, 100. No mayor's ever put a lock on his door. So the first thing I want to do when I take office is take that lock off that mayor's office door.
What do you mean, Bill? Did he put a lock on the mayor's door?
Yeah, the entry door into the mayor's office, there's a lock there now. You can't go in anymore. Yeah. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. Like, what? And yeah, it was insulting. I mean, the city all belongs to the people, belongs to us taxpayers, belongs to the citizens. So I don't know what that was all about. But anyway, my plans to modernize the inner city, Reverend. I've talked a little bit about this already. I think what we're going to do is we're going to do a market study. We're going to take a page out of Mayor Bozeman's playbook, and we're going to bring a development group in that's got development expertise and financial expertise. We're going to put together a downtown redevelopment plan, and the property owners who want to participate will be welcome to participate. And the people that are not willing to participate will just condemn their property and say, here's what your property's worth. Here's a check. Thank you very much. We're not going to let you stand in the way of progress anymore. Ed Bremer and the Soriano family stood in the way of progress downtown for a long time. And, we've got the tools now that we didn't have then to not allow that to happen. So, you can call it heavy-handed, but I think, having a vibrant, alive inner city is critical to our city. And so that's what I'm going to do. And like I said, it needs to be housing. We need to have a lot of housing. And that's, housing can be a lot less expensive if you can build a 10-story building than when you build a single family home.
Well, that's 100% facts there for sure. Well, Bill, I appreciate you coming on. I'm going to give you the last word, however you want to wrap it up and leave the audience with your final thoughts.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the time, Marwan, to be here, and appreciated all the great questions we've had. You're right. This is we're at a crossroads. I'm giving up a very successful law practice to do this because I want to do it. And so remember to vote. You don't have a lot of time left to vote. Your ballot's probably on your kitchen table or in your mailbox. And I'd appreciate it if you'd read the Kitsap Sun article, which I thought was really good, that profiled both candidates. And I hope you vote for me because I'd love to be your mayor. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, again, you have our tremendous thanks for coming on and making yourself accessible. Win or lose, I'm hoping that we can meet in person and
Sure.
find some ways to work together to continue to move Bremerton in the direction that we want to see, for ourselves. And definitely, I've got a 10-year-old daughter that's here, and so I want to leave it a better place than I found it, for sure.
Yeah, me too. Well, thank you so much, Marwan.
You got it. All right, everyone. That is Bill Broughton running for Bremerton mayor. The election is November 2nd. So check it out. Please share the broadcast and let people know about what he's about and what he stands for. And again, tune in tomorrow night at 5 p.m. for Deborah's Corner, and we will be back then. I'm Marwan Cameron, and this is The Conduit. Thank you, everyone.